Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to News Dose. And PlayStation just dropped a state of play today where they showed off Deathloop, which is kind of a weird situation considering this is technically an Xbox studio game, but PlayStation has it as a timed exclusive. But yeah, it's a whole weird situation, but they did show off Deathloop today, plus some more over at State of Play, so we're going to kind of talk about that later in the video. And then also, Xbox posted a pretty significant update on one of the best RPGs that released last generation, and this is just a great sign moving forward in the future of the Xbox series, so we'll talk about that as well. To start today off though, we're actually going to take a look at a Nintendo Switch console exclusive being Monster Hunter Stories 2. Now, Monster Hunter Stories 2 releases tomorrow on July 9th, and this is a game that I've had pre-ordered for a little while now, as the first game was really good. It's kind of like a Pokemon meets Monster Hunter type of game, and it's a weird combination, but surprisingly, it works really well. The first was just a good turn-based RPG, and I think the second one looks even better. Hopefully it is. But we did get some reviews for this game, and then they also kind of posted an update alleviating some concern for fans. Kind of get into that here in just a moment. But yes, Monster Hunter Stories 2 reviews did start to go out yesterday, and it currently sits at an 81 overall score on Metacritic. Yeah, so Nintendo and Capcom just continues to be on absolute fire here recently. Of course, Capcom in recent years has released several high-profile games that's been received really well among critics and fans alike, whether that be from the Resident Evil franchise or here, in this case, with Monster Hunter. Capcom's just been doing a great job. But then you have the Nintendo Switch, and really there's just been so many great exclusive titles released for the Switch so far in 2021. Earlier this year, you had Mario 3D World plus Bowser's Fury, then you had Monster Hunter Rise, new Pokemon Snap, Bravely Default 2, and now this month, not only will we be getting Monster Hunter Stories 2, but then later in the month you also get Zelda Skyward Sword HD. So the Nintendo Switch has just had a phenomenal library so far in 2021, and it does look like Monster Hunter Stories 2 is going to be another really good title that you can pick up on the Switch tomorrow on July 9th. Again, this is a turn-based RPG, and we don't really see a lot of these bigger AAA turn-based RPGs anymore, so it's really nice to see Monster Hunter Stories 2 being received so well. Now, while we're on the topic of Monster Hunter Stories 2, there was a report going around last week that the physical version of this game could possibly require 15 gigabytes to play. Now, keep in mind that this is the physical version that we're talking about, so it would be really strange to see a 15 gigabyte download with the physical version. But apparently, the box art for Monster Hunter Stories 2 did say that it would require a 15 gigabyte download. So yeah, there was a lot of concern about this whole situation, but the good news here is that the Monster Hunter Twitter feed did post an update saying that the physical version does not require any downloads or installation to start playing. The digital version requires 13.5 gigabytes of free space. A day one patch requires 0.5 gigabytes of free space. So there you have it. You will have to download a small update to get the game running, which is pretty typical for most modern games anymore, but you don't have to worry about a 15 gigabyte download when you put Monster Hunter Stories 2 into your Switch if you bought that physical version. But overall, it looks like everything is going smooth for Monster Hunter Stories 2, and if you did get that game, I hope you enjoy it tomorrow when it releases on July 9th. Now, speaking of the Nintendo Switch, they revealed the Switch OLED model earlier this week, and yeah, this device has received a little bit of criticism, just a little bit, maybe a lot, but yes, the Switch OLED model was revealed earlier this week, and there's been that constant question, is this device actually worth it to upgrade from the original Switch that maybe you already own? And for the most part, it seems like the game community is in agreement here that no, it's not quite worth an upgrade for most people. Now, some people still will absolutely make the upgrade here, me being one. I do want a new OLED screen alongside the enhanced audio, but for a lot of people, $350 is just not quite worth it, and I do agree with that. The price is quite steep for what it is, and I think a $300 price point would have been much more reasonable, and then kind of lower the original Switch down to $250. I think that would have made a little bit more sense, but here's the good news. Maybe you don't want to buy this new Switch OLED model, but however, maybe you want the docking station. The new docking station with that white grayish color looks pretty cool, and then you also have that extra LAN port, so maybe you want to pick that thing up. And the good news is that Nintendo will be selling that separately over on the Nintendo website. Now, unfortunately, they have not listed a price for this thing just yet, but considering that the original docking station is about $60, I imagine this is probably going to be about $60 to $80, right around that range. Hopefully, they keep it at $60, but Nintendo has a way of surprising us sometimes. I don't think that we would have thought the Switch OLED was going to be $350, but here we are. But nonetheless, you can pick up the Switch OLED docking station completely separate. Moving on, let's talk about Xbox for a moment, because one of the best RPGs from last generation will now be getting an FPS boost, being Dark Souls 3. Now, Dark Souls 3 has had a bit of an interesting history on Xbox One. Last generation, Dark Souls 3 launched back in 2016, and it debuted at a locked 30 frames per second at 900p resolution. And this was for the most part the same over on the PlayStation side of things, but later on, it did receive an update on the PlayStation 4 Pro, unlocking the frame rate, which got Dark Souls 3 to run at 60 frames per second at 1080p resolution. Oddly enough, though, the Xbox One X version never got the same update, so it's still been locked at 30 frames per second all of these years later, and for such a great game, that's very unfortunate. I mean, the Dark Souls games aged incredibly well just in general, so a lot of people can still go back and play these games. But the Xbox version, because it's been locked at 30 frames per second all this time, is definitely the inferior version. You're going to get a vastly superior experience, obviously, on PC and then on PlayStation, because on PlayStation it does run at 60 frames per second. That's the thing when it comes to the Xbox Series, though. One thing that they've done really well this generation is bringing these older games much more in line with next generation experiences. Some of the biggest things that makes the Xbox Series just so vastly superior to the Xbox One is the solid-state drive with those faster load times and then the frame rate. But the truth is that a lot of these games that released last generation, they still look good. They just don't feel as good to play as they do on the Xbox Series. And that's where FPS boosted mode comes in. With FPS boost mode, you can actually double the frame rate even if their frame rate is locked. That's incredible, and this is something that Xbox has really been pushing this generation by making these older games look and feel better. I mean, really, they've been doing that all the way back on the Xbox One days, but all of their hard work is really starting to pay off this generation. Not only have they been enabling FPS boost mode on several older games, but you also have things like auto HDR. Again, I think a lot of the Xbox One and PlayStation 4 library, they still look really good today, but they're lacking in certain aspects, especially when it comes to frame rate and then load times. So I just think that Xbox is doing incredible work with their backwards compatibility, and we're seeing that once again here with Dark Souls 3. Bandai Namco unfortunately wouldn't update the Xbox version, so Xbox just kind of took it up on themselves, and you can finally play Dark Souls 3 on your Xbox Series at 60 frames per second. Unfortunately, it will still be locked at 900p resolution, but even then, this does bring Dark Souls 3 much more in line with other experiences on other platforms, and that is absolutely fantastic news. This is one of the exact reasons on why I think Xbox has such a bright future, though. They just do so much work for their fans, and once again, we're seeing that with FPS boosted mode. They're going out of their way to make these games feel better on the Xbox Series, and all this is completely free. It's not like you're paying $60 to $70 for some kind of remaster, but instead you're getting a free update to play these games and just make them feel like next generation games. So kudos to Xbox on all their hard work for the Xbox Series backwards compatibility program. Moving on, let's talk about PlayStation State of Play, as they just finished up with their first event after E3, and you know what? I thought this was overall pretty solid event. Now, I know that some fans are going to be a little disappointed about this because there wasn't those big blockbuster games here, but they did kind of set expectations that this was going to be an event that focuses on independent and third-party games. You're still going to have to wait for some of their heavy hitters like God of War Ragnarok and Horizon Forbidden West, but we will get those hopefully sooner rather than later. But with that said, there was still some really good looking games here, and for today we're actually going to look at some of the better games that was showcased at this PlayStation State of Play. Now, they did showcase, I believe it was 11 different games, including Arcadegeddon, which were released in early access today. Then you have Tribes of Midgard, Fist Forged Torch, which releases on September 10th. You have Hunter Arena Legends, which is this melee-focused battle royale type of game that releases into PlayStation Plus next month. Now, this game is available on Steam through early access, and it does have mixed results, though that could be some of the growing pains going through early access, and then some of the more recent reviews that are giving a negative score simply because the player user base is pretty much dead on Steam. So, I mean, with it coming to PlayStation Plus, it's a good opportunity for this game to get a real user base, and maybe this could be a game that's a bit of a diamond in the rough. I'm not really big into battle royales myself, but if you are, again, this game will be launching into PlayStation Plus in August, so you can check out Hunter's Arena Legends. Then you have Sifu, which is this beat-em-up type brawler type of game. They've actually talked about this one in the past before as well, but it does look like it's gotten delayed into early 2022. Then you have Demon Slayer coming from Sega, which releases on October 15th. And then there was Jet the Far Shore, which kind of reminded me of No Man's Sky a bit. You do kind of go to a different planet and you kind of travel across it. There's different species on it, but yeah, it did kind of remind me of No Man's Sky. But there was actually 4 games here specifically that I think was really exciting at this State of Play. And the first one of those is actually a PlayStation VR title, which I know not everybody's really into, but they did reveal Moss Book 2. Now, the reason this one is so exciting is because the first Moss, to this day, in my opinion, is actually one of the better PlayStation VR experiences. Moss is a really good third-person action platforming puzzle game. It's just a really solid VR experience, and it kind of came out early on in the PSVR lifecycle. So now with VR advancing even further and all the things that we've learned since Moss originally launched onto the PSVR headset, yeah, I think the sequel is going to be something you really need to look out for if you do have PlayStation VR. Moss 2 automatically goes to the top of the list of some of the most highly anticipated VR experiences coming out. So if you do like VR, this is absolutely a game you need to keep an eye on because, like I said before, Moss 1 was a really good game, and I expect this one to be even better with all the things that they learned from that first game and then all the things that we've just learned in general from VR over the last couple years. And here's where we get into some of the bigger stuff at this event, where we got some updates for 3 different big AAA games. And 2 of those actually releases the same day, which is not really ideal, but yes, they did post an updated trailer for both Lost Judgment and then Death Stranding Director's Cut. Now, as you all probably know, I'm a big fan of the Yakuza franchise, and I'm really, really excited for Lost Judgment, which will be releasing on September 24th later this year. Cannot wait to play this game, and the new trailer that they did show today, yes, Lost Judgment looks absolutely excellent. It's about what you expect when it comes to this franchise, though I did notice that it had some like Uncharted climbing sections in this one. That was not in the first game, so I'm kind of interested to see where they're going to go with that. But yes, Lost Judgment looks absolutely excellent, though it does release on September 24th, which is an important date because Death Stranding Director's Cut also got a release date for, yep, you guessed it, September 24th. That is not particularly ideal, and this is really the second time this year that it's happened to the Yakuza franchise. The Judgment HD release kind of went through a similar situation where several big games was releasing right as that game came out. And now here we are yet again with Lost Judgment, and it's releasing the same day as Death Stranding Director's Cut. I guess it is what it is, but the good news is that Lost Judgment does look absolutely excellent. Now, the good news here is that we also got this updated trailer for Death Stranding Director's Cut, and it has a ton of new content. Yeah, so let's just go ahead and check this out. Death Stranding Director's Cut includes new story missions, new enemies, upgraded melee combat, which is definitely a big one. There's mounted machine guns, a firing range, cargo catapults, a support skeleton, buddy bots, jump ramps, fragile circuits, DualSense haptic feedback, trigger resistance, 3D audio. Of course, you have faster solid-state drive loading, and then you have 2 different performance modes. You have Performance Mode, which is an upscaled 4K resolution and runs up to 60 frames per second. And then you have Fidelity Mode, which is a native 4K resolution, which will, of course, have lower frame rate. So, yeah, Death Stranding Director's Cut looks to have a lot of extra content, and not only do I think this is going to be a great option for new players to jump into, but because it has so much extra content, if you like the first game, it might be worth looking into playing it yet again. Now, the big question when it comes to this game in particular, though, is what about the pricing? We've seen Sony kind of whiff the pricing on some of their past games, such as Ghost of Tsushima Director's Cut, but it actually looks like this one is going to be a little bit more reasonable. Right now, it looks like Death Stranding Director's Cut will cost $50 if you purchase it for the first time. But if you actually already own this game on the PlayStation 4, instead of buying it completely again, you can instead upgrade it for $10. Yes, unfortunately, you will be charged $10 to upgrade it, which is not ideal, especially when so many different games are offering free upgrades. But here you are getting a lot of extra content, so there is that. I would kind of look at this as more of a $10 expansion if you have that PlayStation 4 version. Now, the other game that they showed here that I thought was really impressive was Deathloop. Now, yes, the whole situation surrounding Deathloop is definitely weird, to say the least, because this is technically an Xbox Game Studio game, but it's a PlayStation timed exclusive because they signed it as a timed exclusive before that acquisition. So, yeah, the whole situation is weird, to say the least, but I did think that Deathloop looked really good here at this showcase. So the first thing you're really going to notice with Deathloop is that the level design, once again, is incredible, which is about what you would expect from Arcane games. Arcane, of course, is the studio behind the Dishonored franchise, and yeah, they're very well known for allowing you to pretty much do whatever you want to in a given level. You kind of choose how you want to play with the superhero abilities, and there's just so many options on how you want to play. And we really saw that with this trailer here. But what I'm kind of figuring out about this game is that really it seems like Deathloop essentially, it seems like Arcane's version of Hitman. So what's happening here is that you actually get different targets that you kind of have to assassinate from the sounds of it. And yeah, it sounds a lot like Hitman, but in the Dishonored world. You got all these superhero abilities, and yeah, actually it sounds like a great combination when you start to think about it. I mean, that's a part of the Hitman formula, and just giving you an insane amount of creative freedom in how you want to play the game, and we're seeing that here with Deathloop. And on top of that, you can actually be invaded by real-life players, kind of like the Dark Souls type of games, and that sounds like a cool little twist here. But yeah, from what I saw today from Deathloop, I think this looks like a very impressive game. Just in terms of its gameplay, it looks insanely fun. That's kind of the thing about this particular event, though. If there was one trend happening here, is that there's a lot of games releasing in September. So you have Deathloop, which releases on September 14th, and then you have Death Stranding Director's Cut, as well as Lost Judgment, releasing on September 24th, and even Fist releases on September 10th. So it's going to be a pretty good and chaotic month for PlayStation fans this September. But yeah, overall, I thought this was just a pretty solid event from PlayStation. It's not necessarily a blow-you-away type of event or anything like that, but I think that there was plenty to look forward to, and I know for myself, I'm going to leave this event knowing that there's a couple games from this event that I'm definitely looking forward to. So yeah, I think that it was just a solid overall event. And on to the poll of the day. Yesterday, Ubisoft revealed Assassin's Creed Infinity as a live service game. Now, this is a pretty drastic change for the Assassin's Creed franchise, which typically makes a new single-player game every couple years. But here, what they're wanting to do is to just release a single Assassin's Creed game and then evolve it over time. Now, we don't know exactly what that means yet, but I wanted to go ahead and ask you all, do you think Ubisoft is making the right decision by turning Assassin's Creed into a live service game with Infinity? And you all gave me a big no on this one, with 76% of you saying no, while only 13% of you said yes. And okay, I do get it, because this is a pretty drastic change for the Assassin's Creed formula, which is a little strange when you start to think about it, because, I mean, even Assassin's Creed Valhalla was a massive release. It was apparently really successful. So changing that formula and then going into a completely different direction does seem to be a little odd. But at the same time, I'm going to kind of take a wait and see approach. I know live service games does have a bit of a bad reputation, but at the same time, they can do really well if done right. So I'm just going to kind of take a wait and see approach and kind of hope for the best with Assassin's Creed going forward. Anyways though, that's it for this episode, but if you liked the video, don't forget the bell notification and subscribe button for more content just like this. Also, if you'd like to support the channel through Patreon, thank you for making this content possible. Peace out.